Hey friends, welcome back to Digitalk. So this is a very interesting session, or you can say it is a lab, okay, where what we will do, we will create a deployment. Inside that deployment, we will create one pod, and inside that pod, we will create one container. That is for the Nginx web server, right? Then we will validate the pod and container. Then we'll port forward to access the Nginx default page from the browser, okay? And we'll check the container logs. We'll see how to navigate inside the container. We'll test the replica of the pod, okay, to make sure that at least one pod should be available in the this particular deployment. That will test scale up and scale down of the containers, okay, and then we'll clean up the exercise. Okay, so with this small demo, you are going to learn many of the basic concepts of the Kubernetes, how to create a deployment, how we define the pod and Nginx container in that to create that, okay, how we validate the pod and containers, how we define the port forward to access the page from the default page from the browser, from the local system, how we can check the container logs, what are the different commands for that, navigate, how we can navigate inside the container, what are the commands, okay, test, how to test the replica, okay, and how that your Kubernetes ensure that the minimum number of replicas are up and running, okay, and how we can scale up or scale down the your environment or pods manually, okay, based on the requirements, and then how to clean up the environment. So now first we will going to create a deployment which will contain one pod and an Nginx container. Okay, so again we have to create a YAML file, which is a descriptive language, and all the resources in Kubernetes we create with the YAML file. This is the standard format. Okay, the first thing, this is the standard format API version. Okay, this is the apps-v1. This is again a standard tag kind. So we are going to create the deployment here. Okay, so the kind is deployment. Now the metadata of this particular deployment, that means the name. If I say that label that we have defined here, name. So this is the name of the deployment that we are going to create. Okay, now inside that we have given a label. So this label is applicable for all the pod that is going to be created inside this particular deployment, right? So this is the way how we differentiate between the pod which is running under the different deployments. So that means if we'll see any of the pod with this particular label, that means this is running inside this particular deployment, which is with the name of nginx-deployment. Then under specifications, we defined replicas. This is the number of replicas. That means number of pod that you would like to in this deployment. So we are creating one pod only. So I have given the replicas one. If you need more than that, you can define the count accordingly. Inside the selectors and match labels, you have to give the same app name which we have given here, right? Because this is the label that we have defined for all the pods which belong to this particular deployment. Now we are going to create the containers inside this particular pod which we are creating, right? So we need some specification where the containers can relate to which pod they belong, right? So this label, what we have defined in the metadata inside the deployment, this label should match here as well, right? And then once it is matching here as well, which is inside the container, so you can say this is the label should be same as pod, and this is the label should be same as deployment. Okay, all three has to be with the same label, right? And then this is the containers definition. This is the name of our container which is going to create inside this particular pod, right? And this is the name of the image which is it is going to pull from the public repository. Okay, and this will be the port where the service, actual service, is running inside the container. Default port is 80. So this is the file. This is the file that I have created. Okay, so now the first command, this is the command we use to create the deployment. kubectl apply, then -f and the name of your YAML file. So this will create a deployment. So let me run this command. You can see the deployment created, right? The first part is done where we have created a deployment which contain one pod and one Nginx container. Okay. Second, we can verify the deployment and the pod that we have created. So first, to verify the deployment, okay, for that the command is kubectl get and then deployments. So here you can see that Nginx deployment one by one is ready. That means this is the deployment. Inside that we have a one pod which is up and running. So let me run the get and then pod as well. So the command is same kubectl get, and now we have to give the pods. Now you can see that it is one by one up and running. That means the deployment is ready with the one pod. Inside that pod, we have one container which is up and running one by one, right? So the first part is done. We have created a deployment with one pod and one container, right? And we have applied the deployment with the help of this command. Then we have validated the status of our deployment and the pods that has been created, right? Now to access this from your local system, now this is running inside the Kubernetes cluster. And now we have to access this Nginx default URL, okay, right, which is running inside this container, and this container is inside this particular pod which we have created here, right? So now we have to access this Nginx default URL from our local system, which is inside the Kubernetes cluster. So we have to define the port forwarding for that one, right? So for the command is kubectl port hyphen forward pod slash the name of your pod. Then 8080 is my local port because I have to map a port from my local system which will reach to the port on which the Nginx server is running inside the container. So the inside the container, the service is running on port 80, and I will forward it from the local port 8080, right? So I have to replace this pod name with the actual pod name, right? So now because when we create the deployment and this deployment create the pod, okay, and when we create the when it create the pods, it define a random name for each and every pod. For example, here we have only one pod. Okay, so let me check the label of the pod or the name of the pod. Okay, let me copy it again. Let me paste it here. So you can see this is the name of the pod, and how this name is derived. The name of your deployment, this is the name of deployment, hyphen there is a random number. Similarly, if you have multiple pods inside this deployment, each will have their own separate name, and this name gets changed when you recreate or delete the pod, right? So now we know the name of our pod. Let me take it and we replace it here. So now my command is complete for the port forwarding. So let me run it. Now you can see that port forwarding enabled, right? So let me go to the here and let me copy and paste this URL in the browser. Okay, now you can see that we can able to access the default page of the Nginx web server, right? So that means our port forward is working properly. Okay, and we can able to access it from the browser, right? Now to check pod and container logs, the command is simple: kubectl logs hyphen l and the name of the pod that you have given. So let me give it here as well. Let me cancel the port forwarding. Okay, now here you can see that it is showing you the logs of the containers, right? And now to navigate inside the container. So for again to navigate inside a container, the command is kubectl exec hyphen it, then pod name hyphen c and the name of your container, and then hyphen hyphen slash bin slash bash. This is the shell where you will be going with the help of this particular command inside this particular container. So this is the name of the container that we have given. If you go to the YAML file, this is the name of the container, right? So let me run this command, and for this pod name, I will replace it with the my pod name, which I have taken here as well, right? The command is same to check the name of pod, kubectl get pods hyphen l f equal to nginx. This is a hyphen l, this is a label I have given. Okay, so for example, if you don't want to use or don't know a specific label, you can only run the kubectl get and then pods. So by this way, it will give you the all the pod those are running as of now. Okay, kubectl get and pods. So I have only one pod. If you have multiple pod, this command will going to list all the pods from here. Okay, for a specific pod, you can give the hyphen l and then label here. Now I have replaced the pod name here. So let me run this command. Let me copy it. Okay, so now you can see that I am at the root prompt. So now, as of now, I am inside the container. So by this way, you can navigate inside the container. And if you would like to check any of the configuration file, any of the logs if you have inside the containers, then you can easily navigate inside the container and you can check that configurations and logs as well. Okay, how it is not recommended. We do not modify any static configurations inside the containers directly, because the when you delete the pod, or when you delete the pod, and all the containers get deleted inside that one. And once the containers are deleted, that means all the contents are deleted. It will not be there, right? So this is done. To come out from, you can use the exit command. Now, if you would like to check the replica, that means when we created this deployment with the replica 1, so this is the feature of deployment. It maintain at least this number of pod always inside this particular resource, right? Inside this particular deployment that we have created. So now we have minimum one count. So if I'm going to delete the pod, okay, it will automatically recreate it, because it is the feature of deployment. It should maintain at least the minimum number of pod that we have created initially. So if I go here, okay, and if I run the command to delete a pod, the command is kubectl delete and the name of your pod. So if I delete this one, let me go here, let me run this command. And now, okay, so let me check the name of my pod again. Okay, so let me check it again. Let me give it again, kubectl and then delete and then the pod name. Let me see what is the problem here. The server doesn't have a resource type and Linux deployment. Okay, so I'm giving the name of my deployment. It's my mistake. So for that, what I do, okay, pods, and let me check it again. Okay, let me run it. Kubectl get pods. Okay, nginx hyphen deployment hyphen this. Okay, let me do some troubleshooting. Kubectl, what the mistake I am doing, I'm not very sure. Let me try to check that again. Okay, sorry, my syntax was not complete, so I have to give the pod as well. Okay, so let me correct here as well. Delete pod and then pod name. Okay, now you can see that the pod has been deleted, right? But now, if I will check the status of pods, you can see that again a new pod has been created. And the differentiation, you can see that the name pod name is different. This was the initial pod name. I have deleted this pod, and now we can see that a new pod has been created. Why it is created? Because this we have created the resource as deployment and with replica 1. So it is going to maintain at least one pod always in this particular deployment. Right. So here you have an option. You can create the kind as a directly pod as well instead of deployment. So if you will create the directly the pod, okay, then this feature will not be there, which we have seen just now. Okay, because the directly the pod resource will not give you this feature to maintain the minimum number of replicas that is available with the deployment. That is the reason we always configure the pods and containers with the help of deployment resource. Right. So let me go back and see. Okay, now we have completed till here. So now, simple. If you would like to scale up or scale down your environment anytime, for example, right now we have only one pod. If anytime you would like to increase the number of pod, you can run the command kubectl scale deployment slash the tag of your label of your deployment. So in our case, the label or name of our deployment is nginx hyphen deployment. So we have to give it same here, and then hyphen hyphen replica is equal to number. So let me run this command to make the replicas 2. So we have one is already running. So let me run it. You can see that is scaled. And now if I check the status, you can see container creating. It will take some time to create the containers. Now you can see it is up and running. So now we have two two pods are up and running, right? And each pod will have one container. Right, so we have scaled the environment. If you would like to scale it down anytime, if you think that, okay, now the load is less, okay, I need a less pod to save your cost or resources, you can just give the replicas equal to 1. And again, you can check. Now you can see that we have only one pod running there. You have scaled down the environment. right? So this exercise is done. So to clean up the environment, this is very important step when you are specifically working on the testing, demo, and learning purpose. Whatever the resources that you are creating, you have to clean that. Otherwise, it is unnecessary going to take the resources of your system, right? So to delete, you the command is kubectl delete and deployment, the name of your deployment. Okay, because if you delete the pod, then it is automatically going to create, which you have seen here, right? Some time back. So to delete all of the resources, whatever we have created inside this particular deployment, we can delete this deployment, and this will automatically delete all the resources that has been created inside this particular deployment, right? So let me run this command, okay, to delete the deployment. Okay, sorry, let me copy it again. Okay, now you can see the deployment has been deleted. Now you can see there is no pod is running, and let me check the deployment as well. No resource found in default namespace, right? That means it is clean now. So this is how we can create the deployment with a pod and a container, how we can validate the status, how we can enable the port forward, how we can check the container logs, how we can move inside the container, how we can test the replica, how we can scale up or scale down the environment, and then how we can do the cleanup. If you need this lab document, okay, then you can write to me on digitalk.fmw@gmail.com. Okay, you can write on this, and we'll send you this lab document, okay, which you can run on your local machine as well for testing, demo purpose, or learning purpose. And if you if you would like to join our Udemy course, okay, then you can go to digitalksystems.com. Here you will find all the URLs of the Udemy courses of Digitalk along with the coupon codes. Thank you.